Sarah Plain and Tall. The last chapter is actually titled Life After Sarah Plain and Tall, and the author, Patricia McLaughlin, actually tells a little bit more about the book, so I thought I would read this section as well. She said, "When I was a child reading books day in and day out, I always thought about the characters and what happened afterward in their lives. My father and I, for instance, made up stories about Peter Rabbit and what he did after escaping from Mr. McGregor's garden. Later, I made up stories about the lives of the characters in Little Women and all the Nancy Drew mysteries and all the other books I loved. I concocted plots about what happened to them, where they lived, their pets, and the children they had, what music they listened to, and what flowers they loved, what sports they played. Since I have always believed in books having lives of their own, it is no surprise that the characters in Sarah Plain and Tall have lived on in my mind as well as on the page. I have just finished a sequel screenplay about Sarah, Jacob, Anna, and Caleb, and I am working on the book sequel as well. I have always said to the children who ask me that I probably wouldn't write a sequel. A sequel is a next book in the series to continue the story. But I couldn't help thinking about what might happen to these characters. I began to think about their lives, if Sarah would like living on the prairie, if she would still miss the sea, and mostly if all of them were happy. And even if I tried to forget them and go on to other books, I couldn't because of all the letters from children asking me questions about them. Many children even wrote their own sequels and sent them to me. Because I was born and lived on a prairie very like the one where Jacob and Sarah lived, I know how important the land is to everyday life. I know how sudden storms can wipe out a crop, how harsh winters can be so hard for everyone, and how a long time without rain can have such an impact on the lives of families. In a way, the land sets the rules by which people live. So I chose to write about drought, how the crops would shrivel up in the hot sun, how difficult it would be to farm, to water the animals, and how this would test the families who lived there. What would happen to Jacob's farm? What would the family do when there was no water? What would happen to the animals? Could water be hauled from a river or from another town? Could the family stay together in the face of such hardship? These are the kinds of questions that writers always ask themselves when they begin a story. But in this case, I knew a great deal about the characters already. I knew that Jacob was loving and sometimes stubborn, and that Sarah was independent and strong, that Caleb had always wished for a family, and that Anna was watchful and observant. Would the characters change? Certainly the land would change, and my main writer's question was, would the people change too? What would happen to these people I liked so much? It was for me like putting my own family into such a story and watching them. All of my books go through this same process. I have to care about the characters before I can write about them. As I reread my books, I can see all of them are related to one another. Sometimes one book begins the idea of another. The idea for Sarah Plain and Tall, for instance, began in a book I wrote titled Arthur for the Very First Time, where I first mentioned the idea of a mail order bride. In many ways, my novel Journey is also related to Sarah Plain and Tall because it is about family, how children live without a parent and how other family members can become the parents. I suppose all of my books are about families because of the simple fact that family is the most important thing to me, not just fathers and mothers, grandparents, cousins, aunts and uncles, and children, but the way that good friends can be family too, the way that people from all around the world are family. I have many good friends whom I rely on and trust. Sometimes we argue like brothers and sisters, sometimes we are happy, sometimes sad, but we always care. Often I see bits and pieces of my friends in my books, changed a little by my imagination, but I know they are there. Most often, though, I write about when I was a child, the things I thought about, the things I loved, the things I feared. That should sound familiar, guys. Those don't change very much from generation to generation, and the truth of it is, I guess that there is a very young me inside the middle-aged me now that I am now. In a way, you who read this are living the history that you may write about later. Which leads me to the question that children ask more than any other: what is the best thing about being a writer? For me, the most rewarding thing about writing is making things come out the way I want them to, making sense of the things that were in my life when I was a child, as well as the things that I care about now that I am an adult. As a writer, I have the power to set things down and make them right. That same power that I don't always have in life. Somehow, writing about the lives of Sarah, Jacob, Anna, and Caleb continues to make a difference in my life. There are days when I will stop and say to myself, what would Sarah do? What would Jacob say? And I realize that for me, these people are as close as family. And like family, my characters and I have what all writers hope for: connection. I hope you feel that connection too. Patricia McLaughlin. And she wrote that in November of 1992. I hope you enjoyed Sarah Plain and Tall as much as I did. Sometimes you can find the movie playing on the Hallmark Channel, or maybe you could even check it out in your library once they open again as well, so you can compare the book to the movie.